Hello BookTube, this is my June 2026 reading plan. The main theme for my month's reading is to give a second look to books by LGBTQ plus authors or featuring LGBTQ plus themes that I have previously not had success with. So the seed for this theme developed earlier this year after I bailed on the first three books that I'm going to talk about. Starting with The Line of Beauty by Hollinghurst. This novel, which won the Booker Prize in 2004, is set in the middle years of the 1980s, and is about a young gay man named Nick Guest, who becomes the adopted gay of a wealthy political family, and he becomes addicted to the reflected wealth and power and privilege that he garners by being associated with this family. All the while, the AIDS crisis is looming. So I have a complicated reading relationship with Hollinghurst. I deeply love his work, but there are times when I have a harder time with it. And I wanted to this year read his entire body of work, which I have never done. And while I did manage to read his first three novels, I ended up hitting a wall with The Line of Beauty, which I'm going to come back to and hopefully enjoy. Because I have been enjoying Hollinghurst's earlier novels so far this year, so I'm hoping that taking a little bit of a break will improve things. The second of the three is The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. This novel won last year's Women's Prize for Fiction and was shortlisted for the previous year's Booker Prize, so 2024. This novel is set in the early 1960s in the Netherlands, and it's about a woman who lives in a house that was stolen from a Jewish family in the waning days of World War II. While this woman believes that the house should be hers, she is the only one of her siblings that has an emotional attachment to the house. The house is instead going to be inherited by her older brother when he marries and has a family. So the inciting incident of the novel is that this older brother is forcing her to host his girlfriend while he's away on a business trip. The problem is that she does not like the girlfriend, and what follows is a very tense few weeks that turns into something more. So I did not particularly care for the main character, the protagonist. She's annoying. Now, maybe she lightens up as this relationship develops, but initially I'm struggling to figure out how exactly this relationship gets off the ground. But maybe a second look will change that opinion. I'm hoping so. And the third book that sort of formed the seed for this theme is We Are Green and Trembling by Gabriela Cabezon Camara. translated from the Spanish by Robin Myers. This novel won last year's National Book Award in Translated Literature and was longlisted for this year's International Booker Prize. This novel is set in the early 17th century and is about what we would now call a trans man, Antonio, who is fleeing into the rainforests with two Guarani girls that he rescued while trying to write a letter to his aunt, who is the prioress or abbess of a convent that Antonio lived in when he was a teenager. So I think with this novel, I probably should have had a palate cleanser before I started it. But I think the only thing was when I tried to read this novel in March was it just sort of, I needed to take a break, I think. Because there really was nothing quite wrong with it now that I think about it, that I can quite point to as saying, okay, this was what made me bail on it. So these three novels form the seed of this theme. And then as I was thinking about it, I'm thinking, well, I had hauled another book recently that I did not have success with when I tried to read it earlier. And so maybe it would be a smart idea to have a go at this novel as well. So I added At Swim 2 Boys by Jamie O'Neill to the shelf of my reading plan. So At Swim 2 Boys is a novel set in 1916 and is set around the time of the Easter Rising. It's about two young men who fall in love and get involved in Irish politics. I'm not entirely sure why I did not get on with this novel, outside of the fact that at the time I really was not in the mood for literary fiction. So At Swim 2 Boys came out in, I think, 2002, give or take. And that led me to Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt, which the bulk of the novel takes place in 2002. So Open Heaven is about a gay man who is returning to his hometown after decades away to go look at the house of his parents' friends that is on the market. And while he's in town, he reminisces back to his mid-teen years in 2002 when these friends hosted a relative who needed a place to stay for a year while his father was incarcerated, and the main character falls in love with this young man. And what follows is a year of deep friendship, a very ambiguous friendship, where clearly the narrator is in love with this young man, but what the young man's feelings are for the narrator is very much ambiguous and unstated. And I think that's where my disappointment with the novel comes in. Open Heaven has some beautiful descriptive writing, but I think this relationship needed a little deeper, harsher look, because this relationship has affected the narrator 20 years on. And there really isn't a sense of a payoff here. But I wanted to come back to it and reread it and settle my thoughts on it. So, sticking with the theme of young gay love, that leads me to Philippe Besson, who I read last month, his first novel, In the Absence of Men. I earlier had and read one of his later novels, Lie With Me, translated by Molly Ringwald. This novel is about a young man named Philippe, who may or may not be the author. When he was a young man, he became involved with another young man in his home village. They had a passionate affair before the lover left to Spain to work as a farm laborer for distant relatives. Decades later, the lover's son approaches Philippe, and the two reminisce about the father. As I said in my wrap-up of In the Absence of Men, Philippe Besson can write young gay love like nobody's business. It's just the other aspects of the story that doesn't quite work. And I want to revisit Lie With Me. It has been quite some time since I read it. And as luck would have it, at the end of May, a new novel by Philippe Besson has come out in English translation, The Summer Boy. This time translated from the French by Sam Taylor. So this novel is about a young man named Philippe. Whether or not it's the same Philippe or a different Philippe remains to be seen. But this Philippe is enjoying one final irresponsible summer before adulthood with some of his friends. While he's enjoying these final irresponsible days, he gets involved with two young men, one of whom is sensitive and mysterious, and the other one is the kind of guy you would want to enjoy a final raunchy summer of irresponsibility with. And keeping with the theme of translated literature, or translated fiction, I want to give another look to 11-inch by Michal Witkowski, translated from the Polish by W. Martin. So, 11-inch is set in the early 1990s and is about two prostitutes who travel around Europe in that transition from communism to capitalism. One of the prostitutes is a young man who basically has an 11-inch endowment, and that makes him very popular. The other prostitute is a young trans woman who has a much harder time of life. So I really want to give this novel another look. I did not quite get on with it when I first read it several years ago, so I want to give it another go. So this next book is a bit of a recent addition to this pile. And this is more of a contentious relationship with the author, because I have read this novel about 20 years ago, and it is Closer by Denis Cooper. So this is Cooper's first novel, I believe, and is the first in the George Miles cycle, which is a series of novels inspired by Cooper's obsession with a young man named George Miles. If I remember correctly, this novel is about a fictional version of George, who becomes the object of desire for a number of men, and he is used and abused. Cooper's work is an acquired taste. He is obsessed with extremes, particularly of extreme kinks that lead to violence. And so it has been quite a while since I read this. So let's read the back of the book, because physically beautiful and strangely passive, George Miles becomes the object of his friends' passions. And one after another, they ransack him for love or anything else they can trust in the mindlessness of Middle America. What they find assaults the senses as it engages the mind, and a novel that explores the limits of experience and the horror in the world around us. So, yeah. And next is The Night of the Iguana by Tennessee Williams, which is a play that I have enjoyed in the past, but my recent attempts to reread it have not gone well. So The Night of the Iguana is set in Mexico. The main character is a tour guide who has slowly worked his way to less and less reputable tour companies. This particular tour is likely to get him fired because he has engaged in a relationship with one of his tour group, a young woman who is off limits. She is underage, and the rest of the tour group has basically rebelled. So this main character, who is falling apart, is come to the hotel run by his friends to try to escape it all. And while there, things change. So the next book on the pile is one that I have not read yet. So this is more of a concern that I could have a contentious relationship with it, and that is Kingfisher by Rozie Kelly. This novel is currently shortlisted for this year's Women's Prize for Fiction, and I think my concern that this novel will be contentious for me is how it's described. So the novel is about an author who identifies as gay, who has a long-term male partner, and he falls in love at the beginning of the novel with an older woman who he calls the poet. And what bugs me about this novel, or well, at least the blurb in the back: when a creative writing academic becomes infatuated with his colleague, the poet, it is not long before his feelings begin to threaten his relationship with his partner, Michal. Michal is beautiful. Michal is safe. But the poet is everything he isn't. She has everything he wants. While he writes about steel and sex, she dreams about the movement of swallows. While he tends to his budding career, she writes from her big white house in the woods. So what bugs me is that Michal is safe, when no matter how toxic a heterosexual relationship could be, I mean, doesn't society demand that is the safer option compared to any sort of same-sex relationship? But we shall see. I've heard some good things and some more critical things about Kingfisher. So, moving on from Pride Month reading, there have been, over the course of 2026, several Bronte-themed events. In March, there was March on the Moors, which was devoted to reading work by the Bronte sisters. In May, Randy Ray, the literate Texan, for his Seriously Well-Read book club, read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And for June, there is a one-off event called June Eyre, where, again, participants will be reading Jane Eyre in the month of June. So I think these three events is enough of a kick in the pants to finally get around to rereading Jane Eyre after almost 20 years. So Jane Eyre is about a young woman named Jane Eyre who becomes a governess working for a mysterious aristocrat. And over the course of the novel, they fall in love, and also Jane must suss out her employer lover's secrets. And finally, I would like to get to Lion by Sonia Walger. This is a novel about a woman trying to understand her father, who seems to be the most interesting man in the world. This novel is currently shortlisted for this year's Carol Shields Prize. So we shall see if it wins, which will be announced tomorrow. So, this booktube is my reading plan for June 2026. It's going to be a challenge, but I'm hoping it will be a fun and enjoyable one. So, anyway, booktube, making this video has gone on way too long, so I will be back tomorrow with a book haul. Because I had some books come in today, but I'm going to hold off until tomorrow to haul them, or at least one of them. Another one is pretty much it's part of a special book haul that I want to do. But I'll talk about that when the rest of that haul comes in. So, anyway, booktube, until tomorrow, thank you, have a great afternoon, and enjoy your June reading, whatever it is.